In this episode of the Leadership Atlas, we are exploring an Irish idea which is sometimes misunderstood, known as Craic. Commonly associated with humour, Craic is also about atmosphere, a sense of ease, social connection, and shared energy that brings people together. We're joined today by Professor Orla Feely, President of the University College of Dublin, to explore leadership at scale, global collaboration, and what Irish experience can bring for leaders everywhere. A very warm welcome, Orla. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Delighted to be here.
We often think of Craic as humour, but it's also about atmosphere and connection. Do you think that sense of ease and human connection has a place in university leadership?
Well, first of all, Jenny, I think it's a great idea to be doing this podcast about different leadership approaches around the world based on our experience in the Universitas 21 network. I think you are right to hone in Ireland on the importance of human connectivity, on a relaxed, somewhat humorous approach to building relationships, which is not to be at all confused for a casual approach. It's not suggesting at all that we don't work very, very hard in Ireland. We do. But I think when coupled with that emphasis on relaxed human connections, I think that can be very powerful. In a university context, human connections are enormously important because universities are big, complex organizations, but we are also communities. We are communities that within them have different groupings: our student community, our community of scholars, our community of alumni, our community of all our professional support staff, and then indeed all the many, many stakeholders with whom we interact as institutions and as leaders within the institution. So I think that the ability to forge human connections with individuals from all those groupings is particularly important in a university context.
We know that Irish universities have experienced quite considerable periods of constraint as well as growth. How do you as a leader deal with this personally in terms of morale and resources don't quite match ambitions?
That's something that we've had to deal with in Irish higher education. If I go back certainly a couple of decades at that point, so early on in my career, resources in higher education were way behind those in comparable institutions worldwide. And I think in a sense like that, and as I remember, there's almost an esprit de corps that arises, and that those words from Hamilton, we were young, scrappy and hungry. I think that suits our psyche in Ireland to an extent, to be the underdogs, to look around the world and say, yes, those guys are better resourced, but we have something very special here. So to focus in on what we can deliver, even if we're not as well resourced as other institutions, what can we do that is really, really special? Because we know that we are better than our resourcing would suggest. And let's go about showing this to the world. So as I remember those times, there was that esprit de corps, as I say, in showing the world what we could do. So sometimes morale can be supported through difficult times through that attitude. Our resources have improved in Irish higher education, still not where we would fully like them to be, but certainly they have improved. What I think is more difficult is working through times when resources contract. So if you are used to more resources and all of a sudden you have to manage, as many universities around the world are having to do at this time, you are having to manage a contraction in numbers, in ambition. That is not something that I've personally seen very much. We had some experience of it in Ireland following the financial crisis. When we had to retrench, we had to pull back, funding was cut. But again, there was that esprit de corps that, look, let's pull together, let's make this happen. These are difficult times, they won't last forever, we'll get through it. So I think that is what sustained us through those times.
Can this also be described as the Irish approach to resilience?
Certainly, resilience is associated with Ireland. Certainly, our history has given us many opportunities, unfortunately, to have to demonstrate resilience, even in recent times. When I look back at the financial crisis, when I look back at COVID, we rebounded from both of those with energy and with success, I think, much more so than in comparable economies. So there is something, I think, about an Irish approach to resilience. You'll be familiar with the famous lines of one of our many great Irish authors, Samuel Beckett, I can't go on, I'll go on. That sense of just having to grit your teeth and get on with it. I think maybe a couple of characteristics that help us through that in Ireland, our sense of community, I think, is very important. I think that when one is having to demonstrate resilience, having people around us working together as a community is absolutely vital. And I think something else that we often bring to bear at times of difficulty is humour, including sometimes a black humour, which again does not demonstrate lack of seriousness of the situation, but somehow takes the edge off it and allows us to find ways to navigate it at a human scale.
Universities often talk about ambition in terms of scale and impact. When you're thinking about sustaining ambition over a long period of time, what kind of emotional energy do you think a leader needs to create around them?
My colleague, Professor Colin Scott, Deputy President and Registrar here at UCD, often uses the phrase grounded optimism, which I think is a great description of what is needed to sustain, as you say, ambition over time, periods when things are going well and periods when things are perhaps not going so well. A leader needs that optimism, needs that energy, needs to bring that sense of enthusiasm around what the organisation is about. But too much energy and enthusiasm can exhaust an organisation, particularly if it is not reflected in the reality of progress. So I think that enthusiasm needs to be visible in progress on the ground, progress for the institution, progress for individuals within the institution. So there's that groundedness coupled with that sense of energy, enthusiasm, optimism, that I think is what leadership in institutions such as universities is all about. So for me, the ability to project confidence, conviction, calmness, clarity, I think these are all important words in sustaining ambition over time.
So thinking about leadership as judgment, leadership is often talked about as vision setting, but in reality, it is about judgment. It is about reading the room, sensing timing, knowing when to push and when to hold back. What do you think is important for a leader in these situations? And are these things that you learn over time, or are they almost intuitive?
I think the judgment has to be intuitive to an extent because you're making judgments almost every moment of the day as a leader. You know, it can be the big moments with the big red flashing lights. This is a big moment of judgment for the institution, but it's also something that you have to bring to every personal interaction that you have. You know, when you answer an email, when you are talking to somebody at an event, in some sense, you are judging and calibrating how you respond. Because I think as a university leader, one is very aware that you carry the institution into the room with you, and that your actions, your reactions say something about the institution. So I think at some level, in making judgments, there are things that are always at the back of your mind as a leader. There's, you know, you have to bring in a clarity of purpose and of values. You have to say, do I have all the information here? What are the risks? What are the opportunities? What are the consequences intended and unintended? How will my action here be seen by others? What will stakeholders make of it? So there's some list at the back of your mind. And for the very big judgments, it's so important, and it is such a bonus to have, as I am fortunate enough to do, to have a great, great team around you, to people on whom you can rely when you are making those big judgments. Yes, the personal judgment of a leader is very important, but to have a group around you whom you trust and who can complement your viewpoint is so valuable at these times.
UCD has a very strong reputation for student experience, and I know, Orla, that you often speak about UCD and that student experience. What creates a really strong sense of belonging for students in a university the size of UCD?
This is a great question, Jenny, because it's something that we think about a lot. I'm very conscious that UCD is a large university, around 40,000 students. And yet we also have to be legible, if you like, to individual students who might be travelling around the world to UCD, or they might be the only student from their town or from their school to arrive in UCD. So we want to make sure that they can find their place in UCD and they can build that sense of belonging. So although we're very large and complex, we need to feel small and intimate to individual students. They might find their place of belonging in their course of study. They might find it in a sports club or a student society. We think about it in how we deliver student-on-student supports. We think about it in terms of social events that we can pull together, all our wonderful clubs and societies and volunteering opportunities to bring them to the attention of our students. So this is something that we seek to prioritise, and we're always seeking to do better at this.
UCD has a very strong international reputation in terms of global collaborations and connections. What do you think distinguishes a meaningful partnership from one that is purely transactional?
Thank you, Jenny, for pointing out how strongly we in UCD prioritise and value our global collaborations. We are Ireland's global university. We see this as an intrinsic part of who we are as an institution. I think to make these partnerships truly meaningful, they have to be both top-down and bottom-up. You have to have certain structural commitments at an institutional level to say this is important, we are going to prioritise this, we're going to deliver on this. But then you also have to have individuals within the institution who also want to drive the partnership. They want to collaborate with an individual in their partner university. They want to make something special happen together. So I think it is when you get both of those working together, the structural top-down and the energy and enthusiasm and the individual delivery at the individual level, that is when I think the magic can really happen.
Yes, and I think it's important that those relationships continue to be nurtured over time. And perhaps what many people outside the university sector don't appreciate is that these relationships don't happen overnight. They take a long time to cultivate.
Absolutely, absolutely. It needs shared commitment over time, but also people need to continue to see the value from the collaboration.
Stepping back a little from higher education, what do you think makes a leader worth following? And has your thinking about that changed over time?
You use an interesting word there, Jenny, the word following, because I don't know that that's a word that people think of when they think in terms of leadership these days, or when they think about leaders whom they admire. Even in football, I mean, I remember when I was young, you talk about what football team people would follow. Now you more talk about what football team you support. And I think that is the better word now that we think of in terms of leadership. It's about supporting leadership because of course, everybody in the organisation supports the leadership in that the leadership can't possibly deliver without this wonderful team at every level and in every part of the organisation. So I think that people need to see in their leaders somebody whom they believe in, somebody who can support their personal ambitions, support their personal values and their personal desire to make a difference. And they need to see the role that they play in supporting, I would say not in following, but in supporting that leader to deliver on the ambition for the institution. And that is, I think, where the magic happens. And has this changed for me over time? I suppose in coming to a position of institutional leadership, I am more aware than ever before of how a leader can do absolutely nothing without a wonderful team around them in the institution at the senior level, but also in every part of the organisation. And it is through everybody working together that we deliver great things.
Coming to our sort of final question, if there is one lesson that UCD and Ireland can offer on leadership, what would it be?
Well, if I take this at the level of Ireland, there are two extraordinary things that Ireland has shown the world over my lifetime. The first is our economic transformation from being an economic backwater when I graduated from college in the 1980s to being an economic powerhouse, a tech powerhouse today. When I graduated from college, there were around about 1 million people employed in Ireland. Now there's close to 3 million. This has been an extraordinary success story at any global level. And another extraordinary transformation on the island of Ireland, again over recent decades, has been the peace process in Northern Ireland, where a bitter, entrenched sectarian conflict was put behind us as people actively chose to move on. So if I look at those two together, it shows how countries, societies, leaders can envisage a better future and bring that better future about. In both those cases, these better futures came about through a clarity of purpose and intent, through relationship building, through very, very hard work, through painstaking persistence. So I think that is a lesson that I would show from Ireland, a leadership lesson that better futures are possible.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, I think they are very powerful lessons. And I think the comments that you've given us today really sort of exemplify those lessons and the characteristics of leadership that we've been talking about. So a very warm thank you from me for your contribution today. Thank you very much. And I might just add that in 2028, U21's annual meeting is going to be held at UCD, and we are looking forward to that greatly. And I know it'll be an absolute splendid event.
It truly will, and I'm greatly looking forward to it.